Let's start with our second session of the panel Overlapping Disciplines. Now we will have input of 4 of our kind guests. 3 of them will be online and 1 of them will be present because it's Jehlík, which is affiliated to this faculty. And I will have also 2 kind helpers that will help me to deal with this online hybrid situation. I will introduce them in a minute. And of course, there is our key speaker, Eric Layton. So if you had some questions, there will be time to ask Eric anything you wished for. So let's start. So at the beginning of our second session, there will be input by Ole Gustavsen, which I welcome here in online presence. Hello, Ole. Can you hear us?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, everything is working. So you might know Ole. He is rector of the Oslo School of Architecture and Design. Besides that, he is architect, engineer, and also carpenter. This is how he introduced himself, which is, of course, an interesting addition to the architect's profession. Long time, he had been partner of a renowned, I would say, global office Noeta, and he was responsible there for interdisciplinary approach and collaborative approach towards, I would say, architecture and landscape planning. So this I believe would be great addition to the profiles of the people we have here. And without further delay, I give word to Ole to give us some fruitful input for further debate. So Ole, floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan, for your kind introduction. And also thank you to the organizer for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to give you my 5 minutes of provocation. That also might relate more closely to the talks and discussions in today's first session. Anyways, this spring, 4,200 young people sent their applications to the Oslo School of Architecture and Design because they wanted one of the 140 study places our school has to offer in architecture, design, and landscape architecture. This means that our subjects are among the 6 most popular subjects to study in Norway. And we believe that most of these young people apply to us primarily because they want to have a creative job, but also an exciting study environment. Even though we know when we get them here that not many of them know exactly what neither the studies nor the subjects have to offer. At the same time, we see that especially our most popular subject, architecture, has lost a lot, both in influence and position in all types of projects, not least in the large urban development projects, and in areas where the architects were more or less dominant as supervisors, content owners, and executive providers of solutions. Many other disciplines, both existing and new, have entered these fields and in these roles and literally pushed the architect out. This development has taken place more or less quietly since the 1970s. And without the architect being able to take back or change this development into new and more inferential positions again. On the contrary, this development has led to the architect being in a defensive position and spending time and energy defending the old, instead of rethinking its position and developing new approaches. This in turn has led to those who have taken over, such as engineers, economists, lawyers, social scientists, contractors, real estate developers, etc., gaining even more space and more power where the architect previously was quite alone and dominant. In many ways, we can say that this development has led the architects to retreat to the core of our fields and profession, to the safe areas where it's more difficult to challenge us, and to a lesser extent for us to explore the border areas and new areas for the architects. So what have the architectural education done in the same period of time? Have we as universities seen this development? Have we made changes accordingly in our education to adapt this development? Has our architectural education taken actions to develop the subject so that the role and the position of the architects can also develop into new fields and areas and not be reduced to a regular consultant? It is difficult to see that we have done so, or that this development has been on our agenda or changed us. It may look more like that we have not done anything other than we have always done. Little has changed in our curriculum. We teach more or less in the same subject areas. We use more or less the same role models. There's little or no interest at the institutions to change or develop into new directions or areas. I would say, on the contrary, one can see that it is somewhat the same reaction among our institutions as with the architects. We also tend to withdraw towards the core of our subjects rather than to challenge the boundaries and develop new areas. Then there is this huge space of opportunity, of course. And we have seen that some architects and some architectural educations have responded to this and have taken advantage of it. The great space of opportunity that lies in the enormous challenges of social and financial sustainability, and not least everything related to climate change. Urban development and technology, all this has given some architects an advantage. And at the same time, these areas also challenge us massively as profession and as educators. Adam Kohlhaas said a few years ago that he believes that architecture as a discipline will not exist in 2050. So if I were to reflect on how the Institute of Architecture at my own school relates to this development of the architects and Kohlhaas' rather extreme prediction, it seems that we relate to this to a small degree or not at all. Despite the fact that this has been going on for decades, the program has in fact not developed much the last 50 years. And this in contrast to our landscape architectural education, but not least to what has happened with our design program and our design subjects. These educations are much more open, more applicants, both to their own core, but it seems that they, in a completely different way, also want to challenge the boundaries of their own fields. They want to expand, which makes them much more applicants also to adjacent fields, which helps them to develop and to develop faster. So at the same school, because one could think that this would have an across-school effect, unfortunately, it does not look like that, not without exceptions, but the big picture is that it happens to a very small degree between our architecture program and the others. And this worries me, of course, because the need to adapt to the development of our society and the new major challenges that are so extreme. So both the education and the architect's role must follow and develop in parallel. In addition, we see another development. The young people of today are again incredibly engaged. They want to contribute. They want to be actors. They want to define and influence society. Therefore, I also see a need to develop further our form of teaching, especially the master-student concept, where students present their work and afterwards get critique from a panel of experienced professionals. This makes many universities appear quite old-fashioned and not attractive to young people. who more and more expect dialogue, not critique. So what is the future of today's universities, or how do the university of the future look like? As one may ask, what is the future for the architect and for architectural education? Or how does the architect of the future look like? And how does the architectural education of the future look like? I think our strange of the future university is to be more relevant, more dynamic, more flexible, more open, and even more physical, less pure information and more education as a community. The threats to the universities and our education may not appear overnight, but they will surely arrive. People often overestimate the impact of change in the short term, but they also underestimate it in the long term. And do remember, most changes come gradually and then suddenly. I'm sure you all think now that I'm too pessimistic, too negative on behalf of both the future of the universities and our architectural education, and also on behalf of the role of the architect. But I can assure you I'm not. I have myself been part of an environment that I believe continues to develop the role of the architect and the architecture every day by opening up different fields, merging fields, and inviting others in to take part of the experience. My 20 years in Snøhetta that made me an optimist, and I'm still an optimist, also after 7 years in an academic institution, because I see that there are so many opportunities for change and to renew. The opportunities are there, right under our nose, but we must seize them, we must grab them, and we must develop faster. We must co-work more closely with each other and other fields, because then I think there is no reason to be concerned for the future of the architect or architecture or architectural education. The future offers a lot of possibilities and huge challenges of our time. We will find our opportunities. Many are already showing us the way forward, but we will try to be front runners. We should try to be front runners, not followers. And we should also remember that to get support for to keep the existing is most of the times very easy, but to get support for change and sometimes the unknown is a lot more challenging, even when we know the change is for the better. But first and foremost, we should not hold on too long to the old, because it makes us look old and old-fashioned. And even worse, it might happen, and this is my concern, that we one day will be out of fashion. And all those talented people, the talented young people who today choose us and dream to be an architect or a designer, stop doing it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ole, very much. Thank you for the input. And we will continue with the second speaker, which is my dear friend, I would say, and professor here at the Technical University Prague, actually also head of the Department of Urban Design, Professor Jan Jehlík. To let him introduce me briefly, he held several public positions. For example, it might be municipal development, the leadership of municipal development department in Ústí nad Labem. After the fall of Iron Curtain, you know, in the new free state of the things, he established his own architectural studio. He organizes important conference on urban planning here in Czech Republic, which is called Inventory of Urbanism. And he published, you know, quite popular books that are, I would say, popular, especially among students. And it was several of them. They are in Czech, so you wouldn't understand. But for example, one of the most popular is Rukojeť urbanismu. And currently, he also participated in the preparation of Prague Metropolitan Plan. So this is briefly Jan Jehlík, and I would kindly ask him to give us a short input to the debate.
Thank you. Hello. I like to hear about something about myself. Thank you. I'm wondering that I suppose that architecture, or we are the only profession which is looking for itself, or its field, or its claim. It's wandering. It's wandering. For example, comparison with doctors or lawyers. The same old professions. At first, I have to declare, I don't want to change the world by architecture. And the second is, I don't believe in teaching so much. I believe in learning, and it's different. What is really unbelievable, let's say in urban scale, we are able to live in medieval towns or medieval houses, medieval cities, very old structures, result of very different commissions from nowadays. It still works, and we love it. With all new our requirements. It's not about romanticism or sentimentality. It's about a function, real function of our lives. So the question is, what are the substantive, durable information we can excerpt and to learn? Overlapping of disciplines. What disciplines? Architecture is the discipline in all scales and forms, regardless of ratio of natural or build-up amount. Naturally, it is gathering different and flowing sources, of course. The core is to organize and shape them together into proper physical form within a real time and place. And the form, what's the form? That's a very interesting question all the time. I try to explain it by triad or three knowns: matter, space, and activities or events. Because triad is, right, let's say circle, it is not about linear relations. And these three phenomena, let's say, we have to describe or to find out their morphology, topography, and typology, the second triad. So that actually it's not only about relations, but proportions, scale, and relations. So we have to mix, let's say, matrices together. It's about multi-layer, not linear or horizontal blending, let's say, or interactions or interconnections. So the teaching or learning better should be founded on a comprehensive vocabulary. I'm speaking about words, about nouns, about senses, about meanings, about some vocabulary which is some, let's say, space for our discussion, not only within our profession, but also outside. So, and it is very interesting because our language or our vocabulary is, I think, is still destroyed. For example, we are talking about space, places, mix it all the time, but the knowledge about space, physical space, let's say mental or psychological space, is very, very important thing because we make it, we establish it by our matter, space, and events. It's still the same. So it's not about linear, let's say, glue, but about multi-layer as a vertical permeation. Yeah, It's and blending of different sources within consciously shaped solid form. So the question is how to set the mass, and the final or the primary question is how to make the first line no more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jan, for keeping the time and being precise. So third of our panelists is Lars Marcus, whom I welcome among us. He will be again online. So let me introduce you, Marcus. Marcus is a professor of urban design, also vice head of research department of architecture and civil engineering at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. Lars is, I would say, maybe specialist, I don't know, but for sure he's a leading researcher in the field of spatial morphology. And he and his colleagues have been cooperating on this topic, on the topic of spatial morphology with renowned universities such as University College London or Technical University Delft. They have also, of course, published books and articles about their research. And recently, they perform a special analysis and support policy development in architectural and urban projects in Sweden. And they somehow summarized their research and their knowledge in a book. Now, I don't want to butcher it, so I have to find it. So I'm sorry for that, Marcus. But maybe you have to help me. Maybe you have to help me. And besides that, Marcus is also a leader figure in the company firm that's called Spacescape. It is a middle-sized firm with 12 employees, which is also focused on spatial morphology and advice in this field for municipalities and other bodies in this realm. So, Lars Marcus, please, floor is yours, and give us the short input for our further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. That was very kind words, and I'm very happy to be invited here to speak about these very important things, not least when we see the world around us and the possibilities for architecture to play a role in that. I'll try to share my screen here with a few slides, and I think it should work. All right. Do you see it? I think you do.
Yes, we do.
So I would like to share a bit of work we're doing at Chalmers, our university at the moment. We are in the middle of a reorganization of our institution. And as a part of that, we have tried to look into the field of knowledge of architecture and try to do something we call an epistemological analysis of architecture. Of course, we do not think that we have the final solution here, but this is just sharing a bit how we've been talking now in preparation of this reorganization so that we can regroup what we think could be a logical way and a strong way for future education and research in architecture. And I think a fundamental thing that many speakers already have touched on, I think we are rather fond of talking about architecture as one thing, as if it was a monolith. It's just one thing. It's architecture, is architecture, is architecture. I think this creates problems when we talk about our topic in between ourselves in the field of architecture, but not least when we try to communicate it to others and build bridges to other fields. On the contrary, it's quite obvious if we start to look at how we encounter architecture, we do it from different approaches. already when we look at it from architectural practice and an extension, of course, education, is very different from when we do it from research. For instance, from practice, architecture concerns a synthesis of architectural wholes. We cannot leave aspects out. We have to bring everything in there. You know, you cannot come and say, well, we'll deal with the acoustics next time. We have to have it all in place in every project. In research, on the other hand, it's typical or necessary to approach architecture looking at different aspects. So in that case, it's more of an analysis or interpretation of architectural aspects. If we continue to look more specifically at architecture for a while, we can look at architecture in very different ways. And often we sort our research in that way. We can look at architecture as a technological object, or as a social object, or as a cultural object. But importantly, architecture in itself seems to change a bit depending on how we look at it or what questions we are asked. So if we look at it from a technological point of view, it's often, for instance, materials are important, the properties of material and the interplay between form and materials. So that's one dimension. If we look at it as a social object, it changes into rather spatial structures, my own field, and look at how people move or interact and where they do that and how the spatial structure of a building or a city influences such things. So it's another aspect, again, of architecture. And finally, if we look at this as a cultural object, it's more of the meaningful science of the built environment or architecture that becomes important, and how we look at that. An important thing here is that, of course, as a researcher, you have to be an expert in, it's difficult to be expert in all of this. So you, in the end, typically expert in one of these dimensions, because you have to develop your particular expertise in the theories and methodologies necessary to study architecture from all these things. So this is something we bring in now into the organization. But it's actually true also if we look at architecture from practice, it's not just one thing. Architectural practice or architectural design is not just one thing. It's not just one form of knowledge. If we look closer at it, it's actually made up of several different kinds of knowledges and typically come in different phases of a design process. We may talk about the generative knowledge, which is typically the creative and often spoke about dimension of architectural design when you come up with potential solutions to architectural problems. But soon you have to ask more difficult questions. Well, it's a potential solution, but will it actually work? Will the lighting be correct, or the acoustics or the constructions and so on? Where will people move and so forth? And suddenly we need another form of knowledge where we need research to support this. It's difficult to build that on a simple experience. But it's not only these kind of more analytical or very direct answers we look at, we also need to contextualize architecture in a broader social and cultural context. And that we could call another form of knowledge, which is more of a discursive kind, we can call that. And again, we look at the sources for these different forms of knowledge. We can say that the generative side has a lot to do with experience of architecture from early practice. The more experienced you are, the broader is your repertoire of solutions, and the more generative you or creative you could be, you could say. But when you come to the analytical knowledge, we really do need research as support. It's difficult to guesswork around acoustics, for instance. So here we need explanations of architecture, technological and social objects. It also has often necessary on certain social issues. But finally, also, when we come to the discursive dimension, it's rather what you found as a social and cultural object and a more of an interpretation, what you would find in the humanities or social science. And here we see how architecture also connects to a lot of other fields, but it's still architecture in the focus, but it's related to all of these other fields. And normally what you study in also in other fields, in the social science, in engineering, or in the humanities, or many, many other fields, there is also always a spatial or environmental or architectural setting of all these fields. So architecture is a very central part of this. So my ending here is that even though it now seems like I have differentiated architecture to be about a very, very many different things, I do think that I speak about the same thing as in the core of this. And I do think there is a core where we need to try to be bold enough to say that there is a core. And in my case, I would argue that it's architectural form. It's the central knowledge object in architecture. However, it's an unusually rich knowledge object. So we can study it from so many angles, and we can teach it from so many angles. And moreover, it's absolutely central for so many other fields of knowledge beyond architecture. So here is the connection also to this. So I hope this could be something of a background for the further discussion we have later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you. It was a great and precise addition to what we have heard already. And last but not least, our fourth panelist is Ombretta Romice. Hello, Ombretta. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Perfect. We can hear you too. So everything works. So Ombretta is affiliated at the Department of Architecture, University of Strathclyde in Scotland. Ombretta, besides that, is a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute and also fellow of the Higher Education Academy. What I have somehow picked from her CV, so just to introduce her in a way in the field of her interest, she is interested in the sustainable urban design, spatial planning, urban morphology, environmental psychology, and user participation in design. Besides that, or better maybe in connection to that, she and her colleagues developed a novel approach to design resilient and socially environmental sustainable cities called Master Planning for Change. Also, this was of course published in numerous articles and also a book which you can surely find online. And I forgot one more important position that Ombretta holds and held, and this was the president of the International Association for People and Environment Studies, and also she served on the board of the Association of European Schools of Planning. So this ought to be, of course, also mentioned. So this is briefly Ombretta, and now I give you the word and audience.
Thank you very much. Can I share my screen? I do share my screen here. I've got a very, very quick presentation. Everybody hears me? I assume so.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian, and thank you for inviting me. These organizations is my first conference to which I attended in 1999. So it's really great to be here today. Very quickly, I spent 26 years, so all my adult life in the Department of Architecture in whatever country I was. So I come really with a lot of interest in this discussion. But during these 26 years, I also came to know a number and to work in a number of other disciplines. So in environmental psychology, in planning, in urban regeneration. And I've been teaching for 21 years to students of architecture. And what I realize is that in my experience, the best architects are those that have a very specific understanding of urban design. And therefore, what I want to talk to you, the 2 cents that I want to give you today about architectural education come from an urban design perspective. I'm here, but I'm representing a big team of which one person, the one in color, actually is somebody that graduated from Prague University. So Martin is one of our best students. So I said I come from the perspective of urban design. I think urban design is fundamental for architecture, but we are not there yet. Urban design still has got a lot of problems. So years ago, it was described as a fuzzy mongrel discipline because for many reasons. Its definition is very variable. So at the moment, it means that it lacks consistency and it lacks accountability. In fact, his work is really diverse and there's no agreement on what it is, and therefore its impact is reduced. From a multidisciplinary point of view, there's a problem because its effectiveness and its help to other disciplines is limited. The ability to work and influence others is made difficult, really, by a general lack of authority and of recognition of its competence. So everybody can be an urban designer, and yet much of what constitutes its fundamental knowledge is not available, is not shared, is not agreed upon. So at the moment, for me, urban design is the little pink squares in this slide, is really a tag on into many other departments, into many other faculties and disciplines. But everybody does it in a different way. And this means that its impact, and it's the little fish against the big fish, so the big problems that we are called to answer can be very limited. Now, then what is the solution? Well, my view is that there really is an urgent need to clarify what makes it a discipline, a very special discipline. And for me, the tests, as many others say, are 4. And so we need to describe what is its object, its goal, its methods, and its identity. So I see that the object of urban design is urban form, really. The physical form as a complex active system, not as a backdrop, not as a background. Its goal, so the purpose, should not be so much the development of sustainable forms, but the creation of conditions for resilience, so for sustainability to be pursued as needed. In terms of identity, we do in design fields really have a great interest and an obsession for what makes places, spaces unique. And I think urban design should not look at what makes places unique, but what makes places, what do they share? So what do they have in common? So it's an evolutionary perspective rather than a creativist perspective. So in this sense, urban form has to be treated as active, complex, as we said before, and adaptive system. And its methods, they have to really be evidence-based. Now, if this happens, the fact that the urban design's body of knowledge looks at similarity, their evolution and adaptation through time, allows it to be a form of much broader value-free overview of the environment. And this is important because it can have that global perspective that is the only way that we have to look at and to tackle the big problems of social justice and climate change that we need today. So with the definition that I proposed, urban design can have a coordinated role. So then we don't continue to export inappropriate approaches, as Zoltan mentioned this morning, that we are not missionaries, but that we can help co-create appropriate missions. So we do try and practice what we preach. So we have applied this work in teaching, in theory, and in practice, and a lot can be found in this book. We've applied it in the Western world and in Asian countries. So we are now taking part to a project which is called the Third Way of Developing Cities. From an educational point of view, so the proposal is that we really move from this undefined area of urban urban design that everybody tags along and apply as they want to a much more precise one, where urban design is really a design field itself. And it should be taught as such, and it should be taught with criteria, not as tags on. As a design field in itself, urban design really can help every other design discipline be the best that it can be. They can play to their own strengths. And I think that when good urban design is missing, both the organization, so planning, and the design of place will fail to deliver. And I apologize for having run a little bit out of time.
So it's okay, Ombretta. Thank you very much.
Here.
So this was our last panelist. Again, thank you. And I still have a little debt, which is that we have 2 more guests here, which you cannot find in the program. As I said, these are my helpers to help me here by the physical presence, which is lady first. This is Roth Čerina. And she is actually from Faculty of Zagreb, where at the moment, besides that she teaches, she is also advising for international relations, and he is also she is also partner with Roth Čerina in the architectural firm and practice, which was awarded by many awards by winning several competitions or many competitions. And my second helper is associate professor here from Prague, which is Ivan Plicka. He is affiliated to the Department of Urban Design, and among many things, he is also former chairman of the Chamber of Architects. So thank you very much that you agreed to take also part in this panel. And now I think we can start the debate. So I will take my place, not to interfere. Actually, the guests or the panelists that are online, they are always present. So if you wish, you know, hum or something say or sing, I don't know, to let us know that you want to say something. Or of course, I will give you a word in the meantime. But if there is something urgent you want to say, just try to intervene. So I will give you a word as it runs. So let's start. I think there was one pressing issue which maybe Ole somehow said the most bluntly, I would say, which was somehow contained in this phrase. Is there going to be a profession of architect maybe in 50 years? Which is actually what when I was studying in the academy, this was precisely what Nasrin Seraji, the head of the institute, by then asked us: do you think that you will be still relevant in 50 years, and what you will be doing in 50 years? So I think this is somehow the core fear. So this problem of relevance. So how to be relevant, and I suggested to our panelists that maybe we can start approaching this problem through the problem of the core of the disciplines and the boundaries of the disciplines. Because of course, one way to try to be relevant is to defend what we believe is a core of the discipline. And the second problem is, of course, as we have discussed already, is this problem of holistic approach to the world that we somehow expect from architects, which is somehow also connected to exploring our boundaries. So how to be relevant, to the world, to the other disciplines, and how to connect with them, with somehow enlarging the boundaries of what we do. So I would start maybe with this topic, and let's take it from Eric, maybe.
Oh wow! My easy answer would be, as long as there is a societal need for housing, for settlement, for dwelling, for shelter, I think there's work for architects. What you might consider then is what sort of architects or what sort of architecture connects to these primary societal needs. I mean, maybe that would be the discussion. I'm not an architect, as I said. What I do know is that Mr. Landscape or Mrs. Landscape comes to town. So, you know, how do you encounter this, this new energy, this new input? What do you think, how it relates to your responsibilities as architects? And what does that mean for urban design? So there is, let's say, a gradual shift in defining responsibilities and major skills related to those responsibilities and competencies. I think it's dramatically basic to house people, so I don't see a crisis there. There is a crisis in housing, of course, but not in terms of the necessary professions and skills. Well, that would be my first response or my first reaction.
Perfect. So Eric is confident. Is there someone else who wants to somehow follow up, or maybe, okay, Ombretta? So please. And second was Ole. So
I do agree with what Eric said, but I do have an issue, and in one sense, I do think that there is a bit of a crisis. In the UK, there's a very large housing crisis, in the sense that there's a lot of housing that need to be built, but there's a lot of recent reports that point on the fact that the housing that is being created is of very low standards as environments, as living environments, from an architectural point of view, from an urban point of view. So I think there is a big risk that the fact that demand is always and will always be high puts a risk to make us complacent. And so I think whilst we might have a job ensured, I think we really need to up our game in how we do the job that we're asked to do, wherever we are. And I think that there's a general problem with skills that are being taught. I mean, in the UK, there's a lot of schools of architecture. And so why is it that a lot of what is being produced is still of low standards? So yes, we have a future ensured, but boy, we need to work harder and better.
Thank you, Ombretta. Maybe let's continue with Ole.
Yeah. On that note, I just want to underline that my concern is to be relevant for the young people which are entering our universities. I'm not concerned about the profession. I'm not concerned about that we don't need architecture in the future, or how we can define architecture or work as architects. I'm really concerned that the way we are teaching and the way we are running our universities, I'm concerned if it will attract young people in the future if we don't do things differently. So, and it has to do with the content of the universities also. But already I can see in my own country, in my own school, that students are protesting against a lot of the stuff that we are both teaching, the way we are teaching, the subject we are teaching. So I think it goes back to some of the comments already made, that we need to discuss it differently, and we need to change. And my worry then is that we change very slowly. We do change, but we do it very slowly, and I'm very impatient. So my concern, my big concern, is that suddenly someone else will teach the young, talented people and not the universities. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there is anyone who wants to add up, because I would have a couple of questions, but okay, Lars, please.
Well, I jump in as everyone else. First of all, I would say at least from my point of view, I think there's great similarities and commonalities between landscape architecture, urban design, and architects in the traditional sense. And to my mind, I would say we will work with architectural form as the core. The materials differ a little bit in the different ones, but in the end, we are giving form to the built environment. And in that kind of a definition, it's also difficult to imagine how that would become unimportant in the future. On the other hand, but what could happen is that we treat it badly, so to speak. We don't teach the right things. We don't develop the knowledge on architectural form that we need. Not least in these times of all kinds of crises, where I think that architecture form or the built environment is absolutely essential for so many things. There simply are no things happening that are not taking place in architectural form. I mean, we have to remember what Buckminster Fuller said like 50 years ago. He said, we're not living on planet Earth anymore. We're living on starship Earth. We live in an artificial world. So how we construct that and how we give spatial shape to that influences all other systems, the social systems, economic systems, the ecological systems, and so forth. And I think it's our responsibility to step up there, because we have not done that. Because it's an implicit part of all of these fields of knowledge, but also the systems that we live in, like ecosystems and so forth. We destroy them when we build cities because we don't understand the relation between the spatial landscape we build and what ecosystems demand. And we don't even understand anymore how humans integrate and interact and so forth. We're having huge difficulties in social segregation in Sweden and so forth, for instance, in our cities. So I think there's a great challenge here. And I cannot see anything else here than about what Ole is saying, that this is what I find students asking for, to become relevant by connecting to these things. But that doesn't mean we should become ecologists or cultural geographers or all of that. We have to study our own object of knowledge, and that's actually architectural form. But we tend to take it so for granted, so we don't make the analysis and the hard work of realizing how it connects to all of these other things. So that's the challenge, I think, but also my hope that we can do that in the future. More, better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Marcus. Is there anyone who wants to follow up? Otherwise, I would maybe maybe I would follow up if there is no one who wants to take the word.
On the screen.
Right on the screen.
Here on the screen. Left up.
Okay. So let's give word to Patrick Flynn then, if he wants to react. Please, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I just want to thank the panel for a really interesting discussion this afternoon. And I think basically you are right that if you look at architectural education and education in general, we are facing a whole series of crises which are new. But what I think came from today's session is a pathway and an optimism of how we can deal with this. If you look at what has been said, and I do agree, our education needs to move away from critique and more towards dialogue. And dialogue is important. And the best way to do that, I think, is to be aware of your own discipline, to teach to our own discipline, but also reach out and connect to other people. I think it's something that's been touched on by one or two speakers, that yes, we have a certain amount of knowledge that we need to understand ourselves, but we should then connect and make this kind of contact with other disciplines. I think we can do that through a model. If you look at what we're still good at and what we do well as educators, is the studio model is actually quite flexible. And we can use that to engage with other disciplines, people who have other knowledge. So then we can kind of learn about things, be it ecology, be it that kind of a bigger scale, or even a very, very small scale of how animals interact with people. When it comes to designing cities, when it comes to challenging kind of issues around the environment, like all this, we can kind of tap into other people's knowledge and apply it through a studio model. I think and then that model can become more flexible, that we look at how we can have our own discipline knowledge, but also engage in multidisciplinary learning. I think that's a way that we can make ourselves relevant. We can also start to tackle some of the problems that kind of society faces. And this is a whole thing we can look at. And someone talked about housing there, for example. there isn't a city in Europe where the younger population are not being driven out by the cost of housing in cities. So when it comes to housing, for instance, we need to think about how we can do this in a sustainable way. And what's great about the younger generation coming up, they have a much more interest and passion in the environment than certainly I could say my generation when I was in college. I think that's something that we can connect to as well. We can bring that into our studio model. And I can see that I think the future, we can expand what we do, into something better. And I think that comes back to that point about moving from the idea of critique more towards dialogue. And dialogue means between student-to-student peer learning. It means us as educators. And it means us being, I think, knowing what we can bring from our discipline, but also being open to expanding out, to reach out to other disciplines and to be aware of what knowledge they can bring to us. I think that's what we can kind of take from it. There's something very, very positive in what the university can do. And I think we can do this in a way that in many ways practice cannot do, because practice is driven most of the time by a bottom line of finance and making a profit. In university, we have to live in a financial model, but there's a little bit more freedom to explore and experiment with things. I think that's something we should not be afraid to take up. So thanks. And thanks once again to the panel for a really excellent discussion.
So thanks a lot, Patrick. Thanks for the input. Maybe I would, I'm really glad that the discussion somehow turned to the education immediately, which is perfect. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper, that we come to concrete things. And maybe I would start with Ombretta, because she said, one very concrete thing, and this was that she mentioned the skills that are being taught, and that she thinks that maybe we should somehow think about it, which skills we are teaching. So which skills are there, Ombretta?
Well, I'm thinking about a Department of Architecture and what it teaches in urban design, for example. A or B has got one criteria that is has got an urban design component, and therefore the interpretation of what needs to be taught in relationship to architecture as an integral contributor to the city is very open. So you get the normal classes where you get taught some of the fundamental theories, but you never get taught, very rarely you get taught to do urban design. And the act of designing the city is a difficult one, is a technical one, because you need to, you need to deal with scales. We need to deal with how form changes in times. The city is something that changes over hundreds of years. It's very difficult to find the institutions that actually manage to teach this. So somehow my frustration is that very often schools of architecture take a brush and input, it's spoon feed a little bit of what they call urban design, but it applies for many other disciplines, psychology, but it's fairly tokenistic. They normally do it in their fifth year. So as a specialism, by that time, the student has already been molded, has already an imprint, a way of working. So Patrick before said something interesting about collaboration. I think architecture, landscape architecture, planning, urban design, sorry if I'm missing something out, but they do have really the studio as a fantastic arena in which to collaborate, but not pretend that a student of architecture should specialize also in urban design, in landscape architecture, and in interior design, which is something that we're trying to do. We're trying to shape an urban designer that can do all these things. And instead, no, I don't think this is right. I think, you can have students from a range of disciplines collaborate together, but each of them bringing an expertise. So an urban design that knows how to understand the morphology of a place through time can develop the master plan in which then the architect can deal with 1, 2 buildings, a block, an interface, a street in between. So the collaboration has to be much more practical and technical and knowledgeable than these million of soft skills that we're trying to do. A student that goes through a normal architectural education in 5 years, I don't believe has got the time, or at least we are not given the time to be a good urban designers. But I think we do need good urban designers to make the architects as good as they can. And I think, so what I'm always arguing for is that urban design should be a profession, should have a course of study, which is urban design. And then you can give urban design appreciation to schools of architecture, of landscape architecture. It's a view which I really believe strongly. And I think in all these, I think that the study of urban forms or urban morphology is really fundamental because it helps everybody.
Mm-hmm. I actually like that this is a really like a strong position, because you say there should be distinctive field of urban design. It is concerned with the urban morphology, and we should be expert in that, which I think is in a way, a really strong position. Maybe I would like to come back to Ole also, because you said we need to change something. So the question is somehow obvious. What we need to change in the education when you say that we need to change?
Well, we need to change a lot. But first and foremost, I think we because there's so many issues here, and it's difficult actually to focus on one thing at a time. I just wanted to mention based on Ombretta's input, that in my school, urbanism is taught by the Institute of Landscape Architecture, but it's given to the architects and given to the landscape architects. So you can always do a mix, and I see also that the Institute of Design is also teaching urban design, and we are teaching urban design in interaction design and in service design, because that's also a field that goes across all this. And my point in my provocation was that I see that these other fields, everyone except architecture is adapting faster. They are changing faster, and I'm curious why architects and architecture is not doing it in the same way. Is it because of the history? Is it because they are an old, it goes back thousands of years? What is it that makes it so? I mean, it's not that many years ago that the Institute leader said, do we need to really, do we have to teach sustainability? Cannot other people do that? That's not existing anymore, but I think this is my concern, and I don't think we only need to be relevant. We need to be attractive. We need to attract talented young people, and then we need to do stuff a bit differently. And I think just the fact that Flynn also said that we have old-fashioned models. There's a long list that I would like to change, and we are changing it. But there's many architectural educations and educations across the world, and we need to do it fast, I'm afraid, because I believe also, like many said, that both architecture, design, landscape architecture, urbanism is the key to many of the big problems we have. We have so much to offer these problems and challenges. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Maybe we will come back to that because I think we could talk about it hours, but I still have to ask also or give time to our my helpers, which I even invited. So again, lady first. So Mia, please.
Okay, I would actually like to follow up on what Ole was just saying. And during both this panel and the previous morning panel, often we are mentioning the fundaments of what we teach, or the essence or the core. And there seems to be an unspoken consensus on what this is. And I actually think that in this core lies the issue of the architect's role and the architect's relevance today. And if we look at it from another angle, maybe this issue can be tackled by observing the professional trajectories of architecture graduates today. And this is what we are currently doing. Part of the team is here through the research project Architecture's Afterlife, which explores actually the multi-sector impact of an architectural qualification. Because we speak of the profession based on the notion that to be an architect or to practice architecture, one builds. But there are so many different phases of practice today where we can claim our ground and state our relevance, that perhaps we should look into what these fundaments are. And on the other hand, I very much agree with what Oya and Hugo said this morning, and what Lars said now. You do need intrinsically architectural fundaments and an inquisitive, curious mind. So are the core skills or the fundaments as much about architectural elements, perhaps, and theory as they are about architectural transversal thinking? I mean, the research of the Architecture's Afterlife project will show this. Johan will talk about it more tomorrow. But I think that we all agree that learning how to transpose generalist insights into spatial consequences is still crucial. We take this for granted when discussing the current state of the profession, and we tend to skip it because we kind of presume that this is fundamentally what we teach, and we keep asking, what else should we do, or what are we doing wrong, and what other areas we should engage with. But the ongoing Venice Biennale shows the eagerness to solve all of these world's burning issues and radically shift the discussion, and kind of implicitly does confirm this embedded notion and belief how architects see ourselves as a demiurge in some way. But on the other hand, this broadness makes it less and less about physical space, and it makes a lot of the content displayed there is not about architecture. It is about stepping into other disciplines from a perhaps not so informed position. So, yeah. I made so many notes, I think I better stop because maybe I can catch on later. But I just think that we need to define this core and what the contemporary core is, because it is actually this core that we are not changing. And perhaps this is where the problem of our relevance lies, is how to assert ourselves in the various disciplines and sectors that we are operating today.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mia.
Sorry for
no. I think we will continue with that. Don't worry, we will continue, I'm sure. Now, Ivan Plicka, please.
Okay, so if you let me to go back, return to yesterday's lecture. So I was very happy when Stephen Hall was speaking about the importance of hand sketching and about the connection of brain, hand, and pencil. Yeah. And it's a symbol for me that nothing has changed. Yeah. So our architecture toolkit, proven by history, is all centuries the same. It has not changed. It's developing. Yeah, when facing new challenges. Yeah, but basically is the same, and that leads me to the question what to teach our students. So you were speaking about core or some basis or ground. So it for me this ground or this core consists or contains for instance social responsibility or social intelligence, or universal knowledge, which should prepare students not to solve nowadays problems, but to prepare them to be able to solve some challenges we don't know at this moment. Yeah. So because I don't think we are, if we will train them to solve nowadays problem, we are preparing them for the past wars, in fact. And main important thing is to prepare them to be open-minded to the problems of the world and to be prepared to find the way how to solve the problems. Yeah. It's the same, in fact. So.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I don't know if anyone wants to follow up. Okay, there is Lars. Perfect. Lars, please.
Okay, yes, I think this is, there's very many things that is very good that is said here, and but just to, I think still, I think there's much discussion about the potential core here, and I said I think architectural form is that core, but at the same time, I tried to show that it's very varied. I think a central problem in architecture is that we underestimate the complexity of our material. We think it's something we can trap from just by talking about it and try to exercise design. We have to look into it much closer and try to explicate it more. Let me illustrate. I think exactly when we talk about connecting to other disciplines, it's not enough that we stay the traditional architect that is good at sketching and so forth. And that is not saying that that's not important, because it's very, very good and very important. But it's understanding architectural form in many dimensions. If I want to design a place in the city, the local atmosphere, the aesthetics, let's say, in a broad sense of that place, is of course a local thing about architectural form in that place. But if we at the same time want a lot of people and call it a meeting place in this city district, it's not a local thing anymore. It's a system effect of understanding the spatial form of the city as a whole. It's still architectural form, but we look at it in a different way. And finally, if we build the buildings around us in a sustainable way, maybe we should build them in wood rather than in concrete, and so forth. I mean, we look at different things. So we need to differentiate the idea of architectural form, and thereby also realizing the complexity of it, how many things it does at the same time. So in that sense, it's a kind of technology, I would argue, that is much more advanced than many of the things that we are very fascinated by today, because it's able to do so many things in a very simple way at the same time. I would like to expand on that idea about architecture as a technology, but maybe it takes too long. My point is not saying that it's traditional technology. It's a kind of technology that is different from many of the things that we talk about as technology today. And thereby it's a form of technology, which is exactly what the world needs today. It's a very sustainable form of technology. We just need to look at our cities, for instance.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Lars. Actually, I wanted to come back to you with this problem that you mentioned, that you don't need to become, for example, ecologist or, you name it. I think.
Yeah, but we need to move a little bit towards that, understanding that ecology is about systems. It's not about putting one thing in one square in the city and thinking that now we'll have a lot of birds. You have to understand the system effect, and then you need to shape the city as a whole. Other issues is different thing. Other disciplines we need to move towards in a different way. So we need to take a few steps towards this, but we don't need to become ecologists.
Yeah, thank you.
Or sociologists or whatever.
Okay, the debate is heated. Okay, let's agree with this. There is Ombretta, and then I will give also words still to Eric and Professor Jehlík. Honzo? Yes, I will, just prepare. I will. Okay, perfect. And then, of course, there is an audience. So then we have to move the debate to the audience. So first, Ombretta, please.
Yes, very quickly. On 2 points, what do we need to teach our students, and on what Lars touched upon in relationship to systems. The young people that want to study architecture and design disciplines today, come very socially and environmentally aware. They really want to make a change. And I think this is fundamental. This is great. Now, to make the best out of this potential, I think we really need to make them very aware of the failures, not just the successes that we've had in the past. And the failures are something that we rarely touch upon. Now, there are many disciplines such as geography, psychology, economics that are very good, have been very good at measuring, at reporting and understanding these failures. So this is where our overlap with other disciplines, I think, would be so fundamental. And so in this sense, you're teaching students to look at the built and natural environment in a systemic way, because they deal and they shape the physical part of it, but this interacts as a complex system with other complex systems. And so this, I mentioned it before, architecture tends to teach by peculiarity. I think is important as well, at least to bring on the table similarities, because what is similar and what is shared and what has remained, it did so because it worked, because it made sense, because it managed to adapt. And this is something that I don't see very much. It's a one-off, it's an exception rather than the rule. The way we teach history is not so critical, it's not so interpretative of consequences. And I think this misses, and when we try, the students love it. The students love it, and then they approach a design challenge with a very different mind. I think more positive, more critical mind.
Thank you very much, Ombretta. Now, Eric, please, of course.
There are a few issues raised here that are relevant. I think, first of all, I think what holds these beautiful design disciplines together is a very simple notion, which is the capacity to visualize things that don't exist yet. I think that is basically what we're here for, and which I think distinguishes us designers, spatial designers and architects from other disciplines and sciences. Secondly, I strongly recognize, Ole mentioned it and Ombretta as well, and others as well. I think there is a new generation of people entering universities and technical schools completely committed to saving the world. You know, they want to be taught and educated in a way that they can contribute substantially to circularity, notions of sustainability, reducing footprints, all those fashionable issues are relevant for them. I think a large majority, not only in the architectural field or the urban design or landscape field, but also in civil engineering, also in mechanical engineering in Delft at least, I think a large majority is concerned. And they chose this education or this field of disciplinary education to add something, to contribute substantially to a crisis that we're all facing. And if there is something like a generation shift, it's there. I think it's also true that we should sort of reconsider the question, are we able to solve 21st century problems or deliver 21st century education and making use of 20th century issues and repertoire? And it also puts on the table the role and significance of star architects. You know, why not invite architects who work for non-governmental organizations in Beirut or Haiti or other critical places? How do they, what do they deliver? What do they consider their responsibility in those places, and learn from them, as well as, landscape architects who work for the World Fund, the Wildlife Fund. just to have sort of to expand on references and let's say the background to which we could re-evaluate curricula and exit terms and learning goals. That's basically what I want to add. And in terms of, let's say, having said that spatial design is about visualizing things that don't exist yet, I think it's crucial, as I mentioned in my introduction, that we sort of redefine the essence of the distinctive subdisciplines. And I just want to quote Hugo this morning, who said, you know, you're only able to participate in a jazz combo if you manage to play the instrument. I'm very in favor of this metaphor. I recognize it as crucial also for the education that we deliver to our students in landscape architecture. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Eric. Jan, is there anything you want to add?
I'm still thinking about core and boundaries, or borders, better say maybe. I'm wondering whether, for example, Brunelleschi could tackle our problems nowadays. I think so. I think that he should, because every good architect or constructor in every era has his or her own basis, foundation, and so on. Fundamental knowledge, skill. And I think that we are still looking for this 4D matrix or network, which is solid, which is tough, where we can, how to say, invite different professions, different topics, different aimings, and so on. And I like that Ombretta was talking about why. I love this question. For example, I was talking about a space or spatial form. I don't think so if it is the same or similar as Strathclyde research, but I like to measure, for example, things, to compare measurements or amounts, to know it, to learn why something is big, small, so big, so small, you know, about lengths, widths, and so on. And for example, learning from Snøhetta projects, I have my idea that these projects have small size, but big scale. It's my learning from these houses or buildings or structures. Yeah, there are a lot of learnings. For example, combining landscape and build-up constructions and social life and open space and so on and so on. Yeah, we know that we have a lot of words in our vocabularies. We can say about interconnections and communication and so on, but all these words something mean. And the meaning of words, I'm slightly losing. And I think that the core still is to construct a human environment still in all types, in all scales. If I saw Eric's projects or slideshow, it's all about architecture. It's architecture. What is it? different. I don't think so. It's architecture in all parts. Architecture as activity, cooperation, and so on. Architecture as making lines. And I remember that my investors or my clients or my colleagues from different professions were fascinated that my line is something in future, some real tough or solid construction, or not building, but something which is reality. And that's architecture. I think that we have to teach somehow students and ourselves too, that it's very dangerous because we change the environment. Each of our line changes the environment. And we have to know why. And also not only why, but how it is, what are the dimensions, what are relations to neighborhoods. Finally, I have one example. I have to say that I hate it. It's gated communities. It's good. It's not open, closed areas, but it was this meaning is mentally gated communities, and a lot of Prague new, mostly housings, are built up with very good architects this way, not connected with the whole. It's a very interesting topic. The wholes here were also introduced. What are the wholes, units, parts, and what are the connections? In all scales, from the flat or room to the environment, open environment, and so on. And I was so fascinating this scaling, this flowing through scales and through all types, open, closed, and so on. And I am fascinated by differentiations, differentiations, but where's the line which say something is here is neighboring something with each other or something other. Sorry. Yeah. So the core is for me. The core is to enable, orient in all these types of commissions or assignments in all scales, in all types. Yeah. To orient and to make it together. Yeah. The responsibility. It's the whole about responsibility, because we are, as architects, the colleagues of our clients. We are responsible. Yeah, it's natural. Sorry for longer thinking about it.
Thank you very much for somehow wrapping up our panelist part. And of course, we have to give also.
Ombretta want still to say something.
No, maybe I'm just gonna let you go because I know you wanted to close, and I already had a lot of space.
No, Ombretta. Maybe we will come back to you if there is still time. But I would like to give also, chance to our audience. But thank you all for this debate. Of course, we can debate it for hours, and hopefully we will do with you maybe next time with the others while having the coffee. But now, please, first I would give chance to our own audience in here at place. So, is there anyone who wants to Okay, please. Do we have a microphone somewhere?
Světlo je děsný, mě to ničí, jako na mě čumí.
Thanks. I am Ilaria Valente, Politecnico di Milano. Just, I wonder, your opinion about the trend. In this period, I teach in a polytechnical school, but and in our university is evident that some branches of the engineering are strongly involved about some topics that are very important for us. Example given, smart and green infrastructure, or smart cities, or from the point of view of the School of Design, product system design that talks about the space and complex system and intervention on the cities from the point of view of the communication, of the use of some devices. And we know very well that this kind of way to teach in the branch of engineering about this type of topic is to deal with technical performance, with problem solving, with specialization about some problems. This affect, example given, urban design. We talk about that. And about urban design, I want to say something that maybe we have to compare different traditions. I say that about the speech by Ombretta before, because, for example, in Italy, architecture and urban design are completely embedded starting from since the 60s because of some tradition of studies on urban morphology and architectural typology and the way of designing of the Italian architects. And so maybe we have also to compare different approaches and different, I don't know, subdivision between disciplinary domains in the different countries.
Thank you very much. So is there anyone else brave enough to keep on? No one from the audience. So we have of course much broader on the audience online. So
because there in the meantime there's a very nice chat discussion going on. So I would read maybe some messages from the discussion. So there is a message from Peter Morgenstern. He says, as Ivan said, he's actually, I think that he's reacting on what Ivan Plicka said. As Ivan said, we need to define first for what kind of world we are preparing students. The one setting of climate change, refugee crisis, zero carbon emission, etc., will predefine the way architecture and urban planning needs to go. Students, future architects, need to motivate and convince clients to go the right way. Sustainability, however, should not be a separate topic to be highlighted. It needs to be in trances and automatic. We also need to educate future investors, developers, and municipality clerks specifically. And then there is Stefano Francesco Musso. He do strongly agree with this message, as well as Hidingurt Sversindotir. I'm sorry if I do not pronunciate well his name. He also agreed with Peter Morgenstern here.
Nice, thank you. Actually, Peter is our colleague from Bratislava. He is a vice dean from Bratislava, so it's great that we have also our Slovak colleagues here in a debate. Is there anyone who wants to react or who wants to react to our audience. I see that you are all tired, but I think there are still issues to be solved here.
Over there.
It's Lars.
Lars, please.
There's one in the audience.
Ah, okay. Sorry, Lars. There will be still a minute for you, but there we have colleagues from Poland. So please, Mr. Dean.
Better late than never. My name is Krzysztof Koszewski. I come from the Warsaw Faculty of Architecture. And I would add one thing to the core we are discussing, which is mostly about shaping the environment we live in. I would add something that we have to pass to our students and we have to apply in our profession. And we should not forget about this. This is what I would call empathy. And empathy in the widest possible understanding towards the other people, towards the whole environment, towards, I would say, the whole planet. So this is what we have to pass to our students. And the second thought I want to share is something about architectural education and the question, are we ready for the change? Many of the panelists already mentioned this. But I want to stress it once again. Architecture is a very hierarchical discipline, and so is still academia. You may agree with this. And reflecting on this, I want to come back like more than 50 years ago. Famous American anthropologist Margaret Mead named 3 kinds of social formations based on the relation between generations. The most conservative one was when the knowledge, when the mindsets, behavioral patterns came from parents, grandparents to children. In the 60s, she noticed that it changed towards the more horizontal relation, that all these transfers were between the peers. And she had foreseen that in the future, this direction would reverse. So the parents, the grandparents would learn from their children. I guess that we are in this phase, but are we ready to learn from our students? And would we listen to architectural Greta Thunberg if there was one? This is the question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, of course, we can applaud if you agree strongly. Let's do it. So, nice.
But it is a great point, really, because at the closing of the Zagreb conference, there was the involvement of the students, and one student who was presenting their point of view finally said, "Help us help you," like Ombretta said, but meaning let the students inform you what you need to change. Yeah. So this is definitely a very, very important point. I agree.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have, I promised Lars, but we have still one member of the audience, which is Massimo Santacchia. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, but let's first start with Marcus, because this is what I promised. Sorry? No. Okay, Marcus, first you, and then Massimo.
Okay, but okay. I've talked a lot already, but okay, I'll try to keep it short. I totally agree with what Peter Morgenstern is writing here in the chat, but I think it's absolutely necessary for us, not least to attract students, that we also do the homework to show that we really can deliver this, to connect to all of these great things. And I think we are not there. And I think the students see that. So I think we have a lot to prepare and to do that kind of research. Let me illustrate with one thing. We also talk a lot about sustainability here. And let me now refer to Ombretta's book, which is excellent, especially the first part is brilliant about resilience. I mean, just think of this, and this is something Ombretta writes about there. It's, you know, a city, it's a fantastic system of complexity. You have social system, economy, you have markets, you have publicness, you have ecosystems, you have technological systems and everything. It should be a complete confusion, but it's not. It's a very ordered thing. And what is it that keeps it in place? It's the built environment. It's the architectural form of the city. And this is not just the thing that keeps in order. This is exactly what delivers resilience into all of these systems, which would be absolutely chaotic if we didn't have the built environment. So this is exactly how our material, architectural form on an urban level directly connects to all of these systems and creates sustainability. But we do not study that enough. It's an extraordinary technology, if you wanted to call it that, but it's an extraordinary artifact. And it has done this for thousands of years. But we don't care about now. We instead want smart cities and hope that our smartphones will solve the problem. But no, it's this built environment. So that's my comment on that. Ombretta, yes, please. I'm sorry for using as an example, and maybe I misinterpret, but so please.
No. Thank you very much, Lars. Massimo, please. Sorry to put you second, but now it's your time.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm based in Iceland. I just wanted to share with you the words of Helen Maria Nugent, who is the Dean of Design at California College of the Arts. So as a Dean of Designers, she looks at our profession and she says, if you look at what are considered standard avenues of contemporary architectural practice, it really covers a huge swath of different approaches, from the architect who designs buildings to those who theorize around concepts of space, interaction, or sustainability. Architectural practice has progressed to the point where these different ways of thinking are all regarded as viable and valuable contributors to the field. I am happy that designers look at us in these terms, because sometimes I feel that we don't really recognize this in our profession. So I don't think personally that it is a failure, as it was mentioned this morning. It was said it was a terrible thing that 90% of the architects in Italy are not builders, because we also have to say that they are not unemployed either. So they can use architectural knowledge. They can transpose it into other into other fields that go beyond building construction. So I think it's very brave to make this transposition, but I also think it's very much part of our own architectural education. I mean, we are also trained to be flexible, and we are also trained to apply our knowledge in different fields. So I think all of this to say that I want to emphasize yet one more time the value of architectural education and the fact, as Helena Maria Nugent said, that no matter how you practice architecture, it can all really contribute to the architectural discourse and conversation, and also to redefining the boundaries of architecture itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. It's great to have such an informed audience, and to have not only our panelists but also audience to give relevant inputs. Actually, I didn't keep the promise to make the panel shorter, so I'm sorry for that. But still, if we stick to the previous plan, maybe there is still room for one question. So please. Up there somewhere, I saw. Okay, so please. Microphone is coming.
Okay, I'm Ricarda Capella from Leibniz University in Hanover. And I don't know if it's really a question, it's more some kind of a comment that we didn't talk very much about tools. And I think this is maybe what I would be interested also in. How can we broaden our tools speaking of, well, I like the term of taking architecture as technology, but also architecture as language. And if we think of teaching a language in school or something like that, it's always about learning about culture, learning about reading, learning about the people who live in the culture or the country. And it's very much about interpretation. And yeah, I think architecture in a way is this language that, and we don't just teach how we draw a future, but very much to think in a creative way of opening possibilities and imagine future. And I'm really interested in searching for broadening our tools to give the possibility to the students to do that.
Yeah, I think problem of language or teaching through language in architectural education is particularly interesting problem for architects and architectural education, of course. I don't know if someone wants to react to that. Ombretta, yeah, please.
I try to maybe make a few points that I wanted to make along the way. And to the last question about tools, I think I'll get to these maybe towards the end. But I want to start with what Lars mentioned before. So Lars said something very important. The environment is complex systems. The physical part interacts with a lot of other systems, social, economic, etc. What we, I think, are still not managing to teach is how different forms, different types of environment interact in different ways with all these other systems. And this is very important. So Jan at the beginning mentioned about a few minutes ago, he talked about measuring. We do like measuring a lot. And in fact, actually, these all work on resilience starting from measuring one simple things in city. But in cities across the world, we just measure the distance between main streets. In many historical, contemporary, informal examples around the world. And what was striking was to notice that the distance between main street historically was fairly consistent, has always been consistent, no matter how far in history you went, until our profession, the planning profession, became established. At that point, what used to be a 100 meters rough distance increased to 1,000 meters between main streets. And obviously, a physical element of that type changes that much, changes the life that you can live within it, changes how you move, changes what you see, changes how many times and how many people you meet on the street. And this is fundamental and is important. So this gives resilience to the environment. And here I'm linking to somebody before mentioned the issue of trends. I think trends taught in our schools can be really dangerous. What are these trends built on? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from evidence, or are they coming from an idea, a theory, something that is maybe exciting and innovative? And I think, unfortunately, very often they do not come from evidence. They do not come from this observation of consequences and responsibilities. I think as people that work in the built environment, we have an incredible responsibility. So in terms of tools, I think a fundamental tools for a student of architecture is studying urban form. So is measuring urban form and understanding how a plot that is 7-8 meters wide generates a number of different interaction between people that go in and out that is very different from one that is 60 meters wide. So urban morphology I think is a fantastic starting point tool, which I don't see very much in schools of architecture yet being taught. And I have trained, my first 5 years were in Italy. So I have been exposed to planning and urban design be taught there, but I still don't think that the urban design that I would like to see taught is yet taught, even in architecture, even in Italy, sorry.
Ombretta, thank you very much. Thank you very much actually for, I believe, closing the panel, because we really ran out of time. And okay, we maybe not. We have still some chat messages, so please.
Only very shortly, because it is such a nice and very simple message from Clara Salzman. She says, we need to teach students to work together. The creative teams have to compose of different professions, and ecology should be a matter of course. Very simply.
Thank you very much. So maybe this is the good closing statement. So thank you very much. Actually, it was a wonderful debate. Hopefully, you guys online, I hope I will have chance to meet you in person, because I really would like to continue the debate. I'm really honored to have you here. Also, I'm also honored to have our guest in presence, and I have to thank all of you, Ivan, Jan, Mia, and also Eric. It was also wonderful to have you here. And of course, I have to thank our audience, who was, you were taking part, a very active part in our debate. And so that's it for today's panel.